are so excited again to bring to you another segment of Meet My Mississippi authors and artists. And as I told you, I have the most fabulous friends and the most fabulous guests. We have another one here today, Mrs. Cloteal Fitzpatrick. Thank you for coming, my friend.
I am so honored to be here.
Thank you. So
And
we always start with, I tell people how I met you and how we came to know each other. And then you tell me your history so that they can know all about you, just like I do.
okay.
We met in Como, Mississippi for the first time. I was there doing a book signing, and
Yeah.
you said that you weren't even thinking about coming that day. What happened?
I don't know. I just I got up that because I'd learned about it the day before.
Mhm.
In Como, we have a garden club, and we had our meeting the day before, and the librarian invited us.
Mhm.
And I thought, yeah. But that morning I got up and I said, I am going to this signing.
Yay!
And one of the reasons is because, I had just finished a book
Mhm.
and I would want people to come to my signing. So,
absolutely.
you should do what you want others to do for you. So I
Absolutely.
did. And I was so inspired and so excited to hear about your story and your journey and how you have just been everywhere and done everything.
And yourself also, and that was just a blessing. It was just I don't think anything happens by coincidence. So it's just meant for us to meet, and we just hit it off. And our husbands hit it off talking about photography and everything
Yeah,
else.
and that's kind of the theme that runs through my book
Oh,
is
it
that
does.
God always prepares a ram. And it's remarkable. You don't know when, where, but you just know it's going to happen.
Absolutely,
And
absolutely.
so this has been wonderful.
Absolutely. Okay, now we're going to start. Where were you born? Where did you grow up? Your family? How many brothers and sisters? Tell us a little bit about your mom and dad, maybe your grandparents, so that they'll know you just like I do. And they
Right.
will know you in this book. Oh, my goodness. This book, Blessed Serenity, you have got to get it because it is absolutely amazing. But you tell us a little bit, snips
Okay.
here and there of how you grew up and your
Okay.
amazing family.
I will be glad to share because actually Blessed Serenity and do get Blessed Serenity. It is the full story of my life, but it is also a family memoir because it actually goes back to the 1800s, my great-great-grandfather, who was a Civil War veteran. Well, I was born, of course, in 1946, January 29th, and I was the product of a mother and father who, I guess at that time, they really weren't in or of the age to make a family.
Mhm.
So at 3 months old, my grandparents took me, as it was often done during that time, and you can read more about it, and raised me as their own child, not their grandchild, which I was. So I was actually about 4 years old before I realized that my grandparents were not my biological parents. But in the meantime, they raised me in a town a little bit north of here called Senatobia, Mississippi, on a farm, and it was a wonderful upbringing. We had the hogs, the cows,
Right.
and the chickens, and I grew up out there on the farm. And of course, when I was 14, but long before that, when I was about 4, I realized that these were my grandparents. But it made no never mind because Reverend McClinton and Mariana were my mom and my dad.
Okay.
So I grew up with my aunt and uncles as my siblings. There was Charles, there was O.B., who was a country music singer, O.B. from Senatobia, and of course Jean, and she was my big sister. And we just grew that way. We continued that way. And even now, their children call me not Cousin Cloteal, but Aunt Cloteal.
I love it.
And so it's been my life, and it had been a wonderful life. Growing up, it didn't seem that way
Right.
because once I realized I was not with my biological mom and father, naturally, like every kid, I wanted to know, well, where's my mom? Who's my mom?
Right.
And why I'm not with them.
And you will learn all of this, people, in this book. And let me tell you about the people she's just casually talking about. She goes in depth to all of these people's personalities, and you will feel like you know each and every one of them personally. I love the way you wrote this book, because as you're reading, it's almost like you're there in the house and that you know these people exactly like they are. It just takes you back to that, masterfully written.
Thank you. But in writing the book, I wanted to do that. As I told the story, I was reliving the story. And I needed to do that because growing up, it was difficult. But as I told the story, it helped me to reconnect and to realize, you know what? Your life was a blessing.
And that's going to help so many other people.
It was a blessing.
Yes.
And so as I wrote about my journey, I felt like, you know, God didn't just send me to this earth to be saddened and heavy laden. He sent you here to be a blessing. And I tell people all the time that obviously when I was growing up, I must have been a little nerd, because songs struck me like, my living shall not be in vain. Now what 4 or 5 year old listen to, if I can help somebody along the way, then my living shall not have been in vain. Or the song that the more you give, the more you receive. So keep on giving, because no matter how you try, you cannot beat God's giving. These are songs not that I just connected with since I've been an adult. They grew up with me and remain in my heart all of my life. So you know what? I think I was a little nerd, but I like it.
Yes, speaking of childhood, this is Cloteal on the front of the cover. And that jumped out at me because I said, that picture looks so familiar, because it was a style of a photography that was familiar to me. I lived in Memphis for so many years. Now tell us where that picture was taken and about the dress and getting dressed up. Give us a little history of that picture.
Okay, it was taken at the Hook Studio down on Beale Street. My Aunt Pearlie, who I ended up having, and she's in the book, by the way, and her story is there. But anyway, Aunt Pearlie lived in Chicago. I didn't know it then, but she was obviously very close to my mother. And I don't know if Mom asked her to go down in Mississippi and pick her daughter up. She did, and she brought me up to Memphis. And she shopped for me, and she bought me that little dress. And even though I'm 73 now, I can see the colors in that dress now. There was the burgundy stripe, the mint green large square, and then it was on a cream colored background. And and I had on my little white shoes and my little white socks. And don't forget that bow ribbon in my hair. And as I sat there on that bench that day, I just felt so proud and so honored to be there in Memphis.
At the Hook Studio, because that was a big deal.
Yeah, having my photograph made.
Wonderful.
And then after it was made and printed, I went home, and I mentioned this in the book, and I stopped by my Aunt Cloteal's house, whom I named for, you know, and I handed my photograph proudly to her husband, Uncle Fred. And Uncle Fred obviously took it and was about to just stick it somewhere. And my Aunt Cloteal said, as a little girl, I had a gruff little voice, and I said to him, don't put it in the drawer, put it on the dresser.
All right.
And you know, I meant that because I was proud. I felt like I had accomplished something.
Absolutely.
And so, and I am just as proud today.
That is wonderful.
That was me at 4 years old.
Isn't that
And
amazing?
at that point, I just felt like I was somebody.
Yes.
I never shall forget, I just want to add, when I was in, well actually I was teaching. My first year teaching was 1968-69 school year. And at that time, there was a burst of Black pride. Young men wore afros, and they were, well-groomed. And they had attaché cases that they carried. And on the side was a sign that says, I'm Black and I'm proud. And I thought to myself, I've been proud all my life, and I always knew I was black.
Okay. That
So
is
I guess
wonderful.
that's a testament to my grandparents and the way they brought me up.
That is beautiful.
They brought me up with pride.
That's beautiful.
And you'll read about that in those people in the book.
You will, and I mean in depth, where you're going to fall in love with these people, and they're going to be like family to you. Tell us when you decided that you were going to write this particular book, and how long did it take you through the journey of writing it?
Well, I had been wanting to write this book for about 15 years because I felt like I had a story to tell that was worth telling. And I had never really traveled outside of the United States. And in 2014, our baby son, who is an attorney in Atlanta, Nathan decided that he was going to take his mom and dad to Europe. And we were going to go to Rome and to the Vatican and to other places, to Greece. And that the trip from Atlanta was going to be about 10 hours. And I'm a person that you probably can tell from the way I move and I talk. I never sit anywhere very long. I'm always
Right.
up and doing something.
Active.
So it's sort of like, how am I going to stand sitting in a seat for 10 hours? So I thought, I know what? I'll bring my pad and I'll start on that book. And so between Atlanta and Rome, I wrote at least half of the story in longhand.
Okay.
And of course, on the way back, I wrote a good bit more. So that was 214. And so Christmas came and Thanksgiving, and that interrupted the writing flow. But in January of 15, I started back again. And by this time, I'm on the computer now. I've gone back and typed in the things that were handwritten,
Right.
and I'm actually working in honest now. So I really finished up the book in the spring of 2016.
Okay.
And the book, it took, I guess about 9 months to find a publisher or to search for one. And the book was actually officially published October of 2017.
Okay.
Yes, and
Now tell us about the publisher. Tell us about why and how you chose that picture, because we have a lot of authors out there who, have to go through the process, and they're just like, well, how do I just do the little things? And the name of your book, the publisher, and the picture. How did you come about everything?
well, it's the photograph was one that my son suggested early on. I was going to use some of the photographs from Rome. As a matter of fact, I did do one on the back from our travels.
Okay.
Because it seemed that Blessed Serenity, A Remarkable Journey, sort of implied traveling. On the front, I was going to use some fabulous picture that I had made in Rome. And my son says, Mama, you should use that little picture of you when you were 4 years old.
I'm so glad he did.
He said, because that's you. And I thought,
I'm so glad he
I
told
don't
you
know
that.
about that.
It tells so much in that one picture.
So I put it aside, and then after the book was completed, before I actually start to look for a publisher, I met another Ram. At that time, he was director of the North Mississippi libraries, and I met him at the library in South Haven, and I told him that I had written a book, and when I finished it, actually I told him while I was writing the book, I guess almost a year when I first started, and I said, and when I finish the book, will you read it? And he said, yes, I'll be glad to. And I thought, oh, this man, he's head librarian of a system. He's going to take time to read a little old book from somebody he just bumped into. But when I finished the book, in April of the year that I finished it in 2016, I said, you probably don't remember me, but I met you at the library and I asked you if you would read my book when I finished. And you said you would. are you still interested? He said, sure.
Wonderful.
He read the book, and he said it was great. I submitted
It
the
is
photograph,
great.
and I thought, well, you know, if a librarian who is seasoned as well as a director of libraries in a region, North Mississippi region, then it must be worth something. And then I shared it with another person who was and that's one step you might want to do. I didn't want my story edited because it was my story and I told it.
Right.
But I did want an editor to look at grammatical things and run-on sentences and things like that. So I hired a edit, you know, a text edit. And so she read it, and she thought it was good. And I thought, well, now here are two professionals. What do you know? If they think that your book is worth and your story is worth telling, then you should start to look for a publisher.
And it is.
And at that
amazing.
point, I started to look for a publisher. But by now, the book is complete. And it took me, I guess, somewhere between 4 and 5 months to decide that instead of trying to get a what you call your first tier publisher, that I would do what is considered hybrid, in between, where you are in charge, and I like that. But you don't have to wait until a Random House or someone says, okay, or pay a person to find you a Random House or one of the major publishing companies. And I was glad to find out about publishers that you could go directly to and submit your book. And of course, they are selective too. I mean, if you have something that should not be out there or that's not fit to be out there, they're not going to accept it. But I found Dorrance, and I've been very pleased. I was pleased with them. And it took them basically about I guess it was more like 6 months to actually, and that was the time frame that they suggested.
Okay.
So I did not have to do rewrites or anything like that. I did correct some of the photographs because at first I was going to do the book in color.
And thank you for doing the sepia.
But
my goodness.
But I ended up doing it.
I love
and
it.
it turned out wonderful.
It is perfect.
And I have been very pleased. And
it is amazing.
And
now tell us, we're going to switch gears so we'll get all of this in, because I want people to know all of this special stuff about you. Tell us about the foundation that you founded and run, building on and everything.
The foundation is the O.B. McClinton Foundation, and O.B. was my brother. And we were very, very close growing up. And when we were kids, I guess he was nerdy too. We always decided that we loved Mississippi. And I think that's what draws me to you, Pat.
Yes.
You have written about, you call it your Mississippi, but it's not just yours. It's mine and my brother O.B.'s.
Yes.
When we were little kids running around the farm, we noticed that we had quite a bit of land, I mean, it seemed like a lot to some little kids. And we watched a lot of TV, and we watched Western. And we were saying, when we grow up, we ought to make a dude ranch out here. We had no idea what a dude ranch was. But we knew we wanted to do something, and so we said to each other, when we grow up, we're going to go out into the world, I guess like the Three Little Pigs, only the two, and we're going to make our fortune. Of course, I don't think we did that, but we're going to come back to Mississippi. He never got a chance because he passed away at 47 with a rare form of cancer. No one had ever heard of cancer of the appendix, but leave it to O.B. We were different. And when he passed away, I couldn't bring myself to come home at that time. I felt like, but O.B. can't come home with me. And then finally in 2003, because OB died actually in 1987 at 47 years old, because he was born in 1940, I in 46. So, but we were pals. And finally in 2003, I said, well, you know, he passed away, you didn't pass away, the land is still there, Mississippi still needs you, so you need to go home. So in 2003, my husband and I, who were still teaching in the Memphis City school system, we came home to Mississippi and started to prepare to build a retirement home. And so if anybody saw it, it was like, you built this for your retirement home.
In between, right, in between you'll learn all about the Memphis years and her amazing teaching career and all that. So don't think you're not going to know all about it. Get that book and you'll find out.
So we came home and we started to build. But in the midst of that, there was an aunt, an elderly aunt, who was 87 years old, husband 83. He had Alzheimer's and she was bedridden. But Aunt Pearlie, which is in the book, beautiful woman, you will see her. But at the end, Aunt Pearlie had become bedridden, but she didn't stop eating. Mm-hmm. So Aunt Pearlie weighed about 350 pounds. But David is a wonderful husband. He's in the book. You'll see our dating pictures as well as our wedding pictures. Yes. I said, David, Aunt Pearlie and Uncle Willie needs us. And of course, by that time, we had already cared for a grandfather who had passed on, and we were caring for Aunt Cloteal that I'm named for. Mm-hmm. So here I'm about to take on a bedridden aunt and an Alzheimer's husband of hers. But I've never been more blessed. Mm-hmm. So that's where the more you give, the more you receive, because up until that point, I really did not know my mother, because I heard stories of my mother. But Mother and I had really never bonded. You'll read about it.
Yes.
I won't go into it. But Aunt Pearlie told me the story of how I come to live in Mississippi with my grandparents. And for the first time in my life, I knew my mother and that my mother had loved me. Now imagine being 57 years old before you know that your mother didn't just throw you away. Well, that's how it came out, because as I was tending Aunt Pearlie one morning, I said, you know, my mom just brought me out here in the sticks and just dropped me off one night. Now mind you, she's bedridden, but Aunt Pearlie rolled over and she said, I better never hear you say that again. And she told me the story. And you see, had I not brought Aunt Pearlie into our lives, into our home, under my care, I would have never known. And this book would have never been written, because this book was written for two major reasons. To clear my mom's name, to tell the story of the real Bernice McClinton. Yes. And I thought perhaps if there were some proceeds from it, they are to be donated to the O.B. McClinton Foundation to build a center. Well, as Pat will tell you, money when you're selling books, but don't be discouraged, doesn't come real quickly.
Absolutely.
But it is so wonderful to have your story from your heart told, and to have people read it and say, you know, I like your story.
And learn from it.
And learn from it. Oh, yeah.
And they're encouraged by it. All kinds of things, because you have so many things that people can relate to, kind of a date rape thing.
Yeah,
I'll go back to that. It's kind of giving a little bit away from her mom. Your mom was at Russ College.
Right, and you see MI College.
Oh, MI,
which is now, that's the first story. In the book, the first chapter is how I got here. And in a very special way, I tell the story of my conception. So this book goes from my conception through my life until I'm 71 years old.
And it is truly a remarkable journey. You
It
definitely
was.
named it the right thing. Now get into this foundation, and how do people learn about it and get into it, and what grade of children, what ages?
When I got back
Just let us
home, I to Mississippi in 2003, I found things very much like it was in 1961 when I left, which you will read about that in the book. And I felt like that thing that OB and I wanted to do, I don't know how big it's going to be, but now is the time. So I started the OB McClinton Foundation with a 4-week summer camp in 2011. And the camp is and still going on, but now it has expanded to a 8-week summer camp. It is to give the boys and girls in that area from South Haven back through Batesville and around an opportunity to have wholesome activity in the summer. There is no fee. We meet Monday through Thursdays, 8 to 2. We have a snack in the morning, a hot meal at lunch. We do educational kinds of things, math and reading, but we also do fun activities.
Yes.
We make things.
And I definitely plan on being there and doing my Meet My Mississippi. We're going to do some
looking
poetry
forward
and
to
reading.
it. We do that.
So give your website that they can go look up and find out about.
The OB McClinton Foundation.org. And also on our on my Facebook and the OB McClinton page, you can find activities, lots of photographs from when we started. Also, I started a GoFundMe page, which hadn't funded me yet, but it's funding.
Okay.
And feel free to go there. Also, there is a video. I don't know if you ever plugged into that. It tells the story of the foundation. So,
Wonderful.
and you can find out a lot from our website.
Wonderful.
If you go on there, it'll take you to the web page and all of the information.
Wonderful. Well, you all please look that up, and it's a wonderful foundation, and this is a wonderful book, Blessed Serenity. And thank you so much, my friend, for being with us here today.
Thank you.
We have been Meet My Mississippi, authors and artists, another episode, and I am Patricia Neely Dorsey, always celebrating the South and promoting a positive Mississippi.
It's inside me, girl, it's in the air. It's who I am through and through. It won't take long till it gets to you. It's everywhere. Mississippi magic is sweet molasses breeze. God comes